and welcome to another edition of MHQ's 8th Step to Growth, where, as is traditional, we use the first quarter of the year to remind entrepreneurs and principals of high growth businesses of easy steps, their New Year's resolution that they can implement in their business to generate more growth, make their businesses more valuable. And today we are going to talk about economic substance regulation. Now, as an entrepreneur, your business has grown and evolved, but so does the environment in which you operate in. And the latest law that came into play to interfere with the way you do business is actually economic substance regulations. All UAE companies are required to assess their qualification under the law and either file on an annual basis or notify the government and effectively do something. So to make us shine a light on what all savvy entrepreneurs should be doing, and the deadline is 31st of January, so you better get fast, is Kerti. Kerti, thanks a lot for joining us. How are you?
I'm good, Jan. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me here.
Pleasure. So let's jump into top 5 questions that savvy entrepreneurs should be doing. So,
sure.
Are ESR regulations applicable only for domestic physical companies, or do they have a broadband approach and they include offshore or holdings or lighter touch companies?
So ESR law is applicable to all the companies in the UAE, all licensees, domestic companies, offshore-like structures, everyone in the UAE. Each company in the UAE must assess if ESR law is applicable to them and also assess their compliance requirements under the law.
Okay, so a very broad band spectrum. So here is a myth debunked. It's not only for local companies, it's for everyone. And now, if I understand that under the law, there is a definition of connected party, typically in a group or with companies which have the same ownership. So if a company is here in the UAE and provides admin services to a foreign connected parties, but it has never charged for that service, presumably it has nothing to do, right?
No, it is not actually.
Oh.
Even though they did not charge any fee, they should report this as a distribution and service center activity to the Ministry of Finance. Failure to that will be subject to penalties.
So generating no revenue out of that activity does not mean it needs not to be reported. So that's your top tip number 2. What about the consequences? And you mentioned penalties of being unable to demonstrate substance in the UAE, which is one of the key things that one needs to do if it is found to be under the spectrum of the law.
Yes. Failure to demonstrate economic substance in the UAE for the first time is subject to a penalty of 50,000, and the Ministry of Finance can share this information with the competent foreign tax authority of the company, of the parent company, or the ultimate parent company, or the UBO. And a consecutive failure is subject to a penalty of 400,000, exchange of information with a foreign competent authority, and also suspension or withdrawal of the license.
So it can be quite nasty, huh? So you better get prepared. And the first time penalty, it has now become serious. It wasn't initially. So beware entrepreneurs. Now, another question for you. We talked about relevant activity and outside of scope activity. And if you are one of these relevant activity, you need to demonstrate effective management in the UAE. Please, how do I do that?
So to demonstrate effective management, you should be conducting board meetings in the UAE. So during these board meetings, the directors must be physically present in the board meetings, and the minutes of meetings must be appropriately documented, stored in the UAE.
Okay, so presumably if you have been doing this, you're good. If you haven't, then it is time not only to do it properly for 2021, but to remediate for the past, because ESR actually goes back to 2019. If you don't know how to do it, you call MHQ, because guess what? We have a corporate secretarial services function ready to go. And last but not least, what is the impact of not conducting the board meeting and presumably not holding minutes either?
So if you don't conduct board meetings in the UAE, it would be regarded as failure to demonstrate economic substance in the UAE. And the penalties we have discussed earlier could also be levied.
All right, what a program. So start the year on the right foot. Make sure that you are ESR compliant for the future and for the past. And of course, for that, we are ready to assist both for the diagnostic and for the support on your ongoing compliance requirement. Next week, another step to growth. Kerti, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan.